To conclude the first class, it is necessary to present an atmosphere of the cultural context of the time around the first cinema session in history. Our initial market is the date of December 28, 1895 at the Grand Café in Paris. This class is to adapt to the emergence and technological evolution that occurred in the 100 years before cinema. It is said that inventions are necessary for the evolution of mankind. And because of this, some illustrious inventions that occurred in the beginning of the 19th century. Concluding by stating that cinema is the most prodigious invention of that scientific century. Soon, those responsible for this feat, inventors of the cinematograph, the Lumière brothers, grew up in a prolific environment, having the Industrial Revolution as their driving force. Auguste Marie Louis Nicolas Lumière and Louis Jean Lumière, the Lumière brothers were well-born children, bourgeois, whose father owned a photography factory. Everything that we enjoy today in the 2020s, the benefits of technology, were basically invented at that time. To portray the cultural context involved, we highlight 4 sensational inventions: train, plane, lamp, and photography. The first 2 will be discussed in depth in Chapter 3 of this course on the magical melis. These inventions were responsible for shaping our reality. For that you need to think about being in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Black and white photographs are the only ancestral memory we have of the times and customs of how life on planet Earth was in immemorial times. Evolutionary processes that can be accounted for as the sum of a culture lost in the night of time, just as with the invention of the wheel and fire, as a result of the Industrial Revolution everything changed forever. All customs, habits, mental health, way of living and interacting were abruptly modified from new inventions carried out in 2 great centers, England and France. The first 2 are English and were developed to solve mining problems. The lamp and the train. These 2 inventions were responsible for shaping our perception of time today. Both for waking up or sleeping, or for crossing great distances on the globe. To generate light around 1800, the Englishman Humphrey Davy heated pieces of metal with electricity to make the substance glow and generate energy. With the lamp he managed to solve the problem of miners at the time. The second invention was in 1804, when the first locomotive moved with a steam engine appeared. In South Wales in England, the railroads later forced the world to adopt a single world time. Entering French territory. The plane rides on this change in our perception of spacetime. On October 23, 1906, Alberto S. Dumont presented a rustic plane to a judging commission, the 14 bis, thus marking the origin of aviation. Almost 100 years earlier, still in France. In 1826 or 1827, photography was born, a kind of prehistory of cinema that would be inaugurated decades later. Joseph Nicephore Niepce presented to the world a heliographic image considered the world's first permanent photograph, in French entitled Point de vue du gras. A pewter plate covered with a photosensitive petroleum derivative called bitumen of Judea. The image was produced with a camera, requiring around 8 hours of exposure to sunlight, and shows parts of the neighboring buildings and landscape that Niepce saw on his property, Le Gras. Niepce called the process heliography, etching with sunlight. At the same time, Daguerre, another Frenchman, produced visual effects with a camera obscura in a show called Diorama. Daguerre and Niepce corresponded for a few years, finally establishing a partnership. After Niepce's death, Daguerre developed a mercury vapor process that reduced development time from hours to minutes. The process was called daguerreotypy. Daguerre described his process to the Academy of Sciences and Fine Arts in France, and soon after applied for a patent for his invention in England. This period of 69 years, between the starting point of photography and cinema. Between mid-1826 and 1895, art was forced to oppose realism. Now leave the industrial aspect and enter the artistic aspect of the history of humanity. The popularization of daguerreotypes gave rise to speculation about the end of painting, inspiring Impressionism. Now a bracket is opened in this first class. Canuto, in his Manifesto of the Arts, defines cinema as the seventh art because it is the plastic art in movement, the one that manages to gather all the others into one. Now a bracket is opened in this first class. Canuto, in his Manifesto of the Arts, defines cinema as the seventh art because it is the plastic art in movement, the one that manages to gather all the others into one. Louis Delluc was the critic who continued the work of Ricciardo Canuto in formulating an impressionist cinematographic theory. However, it does not matter so much for Delluc to give cinema the category of art. We are witnessing the birth of an extraordinary art, perhaps the only modern art, because it is at the same time the daughter of the machine and the human ideal. Louis Delluc, 1919. Delluc defines the concept of visualism, which was coined by Canuto, as the set of cinematographic writing procedures that manages to express states of mind, emotional realities achieved through the atmosphere, dramatism and psychology that characterized Impressionist films. This bracket ends with the entry of photography in the 8th position in this ranking of the arts. The fact that they began to be considered art in urban environments, it was only in the 1970s in galleries, such as land art and performances, as art considered ephemeral began to conquer, that photographs also managed to make their way into artistic spaces considered more institutional. The photo proved to be the preferred tool for documenting this type of art, lending it an enduring character. Thus, although the photos were rarely taken by the artists or performers themselves, the photographic object became part of exhibitions and the artistic circuit.
After this contextualization of the ranking of the arts, the final part of the first class begins. Returns to the panorama presented live at the time of the first films. All the modern elements were captured by the cinematographer. And in this way, little by little, cinema influenced our society.
This is all being talked about because reality is contained in cinema and it shapes reality, including our customs. You can guess what color the next season will be just by looking at the costumes from the series and movies. This is the end of our chapter, and homework is: write a reflection on how cinema shapes your own life. As a suggested response, we present poetry from the 1980s by the Brazilian poet Paulo Leminski. His vision of American cinema, caused in their perception of life and reality.
O cinema americano é uma das grandes paixões da minha vida. É uma paixão tão grande que às vezes eu tenho a impressão que eu não nasci na realidade, que eu nasci dentro do cinema americano. Tudo que eu sei da vida eu aprendi no cinema americano. A moral de comportamento de homem para homem eu aprendi nos Bang Bang com o John Wayne, aquele lance de amigo é amigo, ou então você dá murro na cara e quebra o bar todo. O romance também eu aprendi no cinema americano, quer dizer, romance tinha que ser aquela coisa com começo, meio e fim. As emoções mais importantes da vida são aquelas assim que são pura carne crua, e as coisas têm que ser tecnicamente bem feitas. Eu tenho a impressão que há mais de 20 anos os meus sonhos todos são dirigidos por algum cineasta americano. Tem noites que eu sonho sonhos dirigidos por Hitchcock, tem noites que eu sonho sonhos dirigidos por Ford, tem noites que eu sonho sonhos dirigidos por John Frankenheimer, tem noites que eu sonho, recentemente, sonhos dirigidos pelo Coppola. Eu sonhei com Apocalipse Now, há uns dias atrás, de tal maneira que eu não sei mais distinguir entre sonho e cinema americano. E vocês sabem, o sonho é a metade da vida, então a metade da minha vida é cinema americano.